Okay, so welcome everybody to a Special Populations 101 webinar produced and hosted by the Joint Special Populations Advisory Committee. If you were signed up to do this 2 weeks ago, my apologies, I was ill, I could not do it. Okay, so let's get started. It's actually a huge day today. We have politically for CTE. Here's the agenda of what we're going to go through. I'm not going to really cover much of it. I'm going to cover all of this, but I'm not going to go through the agenda. But all of these things are sort of really important in how we start changing CTE and the outcomes for special populations and the student successes that we're met with. So this is me on the left, I guess. And Tonette, who is the program developer or program manager for the Joint Special Populations Advisory Committee. And if you have any, at the very end, I think or somewhere we have our emails and phone numbers, so you can contact both of us if you have questions. So for those of you who are new to the world of Perkins, etc., I'm just going to go through things fairly quickly and talk about JSPAC just a little bit. So the Joint Special Populations Advisory Committee, which we call JSPAC because that's way too long of a name. We're unique in the country in that we are combined between K-12 and community college and the field and the systems, and we sort of act as a go-between, as a voice between the systems and the field. So if you all have things that you want to communicate but you don't want to do it directly, you can give us a call. Our committee is comprised of 30 members. As you can see, we're always looking for new members. And there's almost always vacancies in places. So if you're interested, please consider joining us. We meet 3 times a year, one of them being in Sacramento at the conference. I mean, yeah, they're all in Sacramento, but one of them being at the annual conference, which I'll talk about, and the other 2 just being one in the spring and one in the fall. Okay. Our mission is to promote equity and success in career tech ed. I hope that it goes beyond career tech ed because the strategies used to support special populations in career tech ed work just as well in all courses and work on with all students. Sometimes you'll hear me or other folks talking about a strategy for a non-traditional student or a student who has disabilities, and that's not the population that you work with. Just remember that almost all of the strategies with slight tweaking can be used for almost any population. So we talk about equity and success, equity and access. We do professional development. We do these webinars. We do workshops. And we also have an annual conference. We have a newsletter where we do research into what's going on around the country or in the world and what's being effective in certain places. And then we bring that to you. Mostly we just take some part of the article, put it in there, and then give you a link so that you can really go and find the things that really speak to you. And then on our website, we provide a lot of resources. The website is under redevelopment over the summer, so it might be a little bit dicey, but it might be a little hit and miss. But you can always contact us, and here is my email. The committee monitors, Carolyn Zachary and Maureen White, and then our project and fiscal management, Sally Cox and Tonette Salter. And then if you're interested in finding out either who represents you, because it's sort of regional representation. At the community college level, it's by regional consortia regions, and at the K-12 level, it's through the your regions, that the superintendent's region. So they're a little bit disparate, but they still work fairly well. So on this, on our website, there's a roster, so you can see both who is your representation. You get information from them or ask questions. Or if we don't have representation, you can apply to be that person. Okay, so on our website, again, like I said, this is sort of what it looks like now. I don't know what it's going to look like later. This is up here in the top right-hand corner. It says members. That's where you find the member roster. We have all sorts of different brochures. This is an example of one of them, who they are, how you can help, and then on the back there's research, links, things like that. This is more of a brochure, that brochure in particular, for talking to legislators or your school board or parents or business and industry, things like that. There's other ones that talk directly to students or give you tips and tools that make it, I'm going to try to okay, I don't know if you can hear me anymore. Okay, anyway, I'm just going to keep going. So we have e-seminars also, which are fabulous. They are 15 minutes or less, and they go into a host of different topics, such as there's one on non-traditional, there's one on students from non-traditional careers, there's one on soft skills, there's one on counseling students going into CTE, all sorts of different things. So, and the nice thing is that you can play them, as folks are getting settled for a faculty meeting, or students love them. They are just absolutely blown back by them. There's one on internal barriers, and then of course the soft skills one is really directed at students. But the internal barriers one, it's just amazing how much they pick up and then they can't put it back down. They can't unlearn that information about the things that we're actually going to talk about today and how much that really impacts them. And then it's also placed on the calendar where you can get professional development activity information. Okay, if you all have any questions, please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask them, or type it into the chat room. I will try to be cognizant of those questions, but please feel free. Okay, so we also work with the Special Populations Collaborative, and in that collaborative, that's through the community colleges, and Lori Harrison is the primary person there. That's their website, and they have these brochures, which is they're absolutely fabulous. And I just call them cheat sheets. They're everything you ever wanted to know about working with veterans, or STEM to STEAM, or non-traditional students, or limited English, or really just pretty extensive. And they're all research-based and all in one place for you. So that's really fabulous. I highly recommend going there. Okay, so this actually came across my desk this morning. Yesterday, the House Committee held a markup on H.R. 2353, which is the Strengthening for the 21st Century Act, and would authorize Perkins. So this is literally happening as we speak. It's largely similar to the reauthorization bill that passed last year. I've given you two links to it. One is from the CTE Policy Watch for the, that was weird, from ACTE. And then the other one is the actual link to the bill itself. And if you get to the bill and it doesn't have the actual text, just look for a tab at the top that says text and you can go through. Now, as I said, it came across my desk this morning, so I haven't had a lot of time to read it. But it does have non-traditional. It does still have the non-traditional indicator of success, accountability measure. So that will be there, which I'm grateful for. But I did see a lot of verbiage about special populations, so I need to go back and find if that is somehow I just didn't see it, or if it was if it's been taken out, or what. It doesn't align itself with WIOA, and WIOA doesn't talk about special populations, so that is of some concern. Okay, but here's the information that you can go and read. I would be fairly confident in saying that it will pass the House. I don't think that the Senate will be in opposition to much, because It's a bipartisan bill, but who knows? I've got this for years. I thought it would pass years ago. So this is the 08 to 12 Act. So we're a few years past 2012. So as it stands now, which is where we're going to keep going, because even if it passes now, it has to go through the process, and so it'll be at least 1 to 2 years before it's actually implemented in the state of California. And so we'll continue working on under the Act 08 to 12. And within that, special populations are defined as students with disabilities, displaced homemakers, ESL, single parents, economically disadvantaged, and non-traditional by gender. And I put all of the sort of definitions underneath. So if you're new to Perkins or new to Special Pops, it will be easier for you to understand. Okay, so the current narrative requirements require that you describe your data analysis. So data is critically important and growing more important, and will of course be even more important in the next go-around. I don't think that there's any doubt about that. I think the next part is to provide service and activities that are of sufficient size and scope. Describe how the district will review your CTE programs. Identify and adopt strategies that enable special populations. I mean, this is all the same thing that we've been talking about in the state of California for years on how we're going to do this, just a really step-by-step process. So we'll talk about that as we go through. I'm not going to read this to you. You can see it. And I don't know what the new measures of accountability will be, but they'll be similar to WIOA. Here are the core indicators for adults, K-adults. And so if you're not familiar, again, you can see sort of where that's coming from. And the core indicators for the community colleges. And again, it's slightly different because in the K-12, K-adult, we talk about the KC proficiency or math and English proficiency. So it makes a big difference versus just technical skill attainment, which is, we don't worry about the other things at the community colleges. Okay, so any questions or comments or anything? Okay. So frequently I go to colleges or schools, and we're working on it, and I ask who likes data, and the entire place sort of groans and their eyes roll into the back of their head, and they're like, oh my God. But it really just tells a story. And I think that's when we get to understand that it actually is kind of fun. I remember I wasn't really wildly enthusiastic about math, and then I took statistics, and it all made sense to me. Like, oh yeah, this makes sense. This tells me the story. And I love stories. So it's sort of the same thing, and that we all really need to be using it and looking at it. Counselors need to understand the numbers of students that we need in a certain particular CTE area versus how many we're recruiting and retaining in those programs. Teachers need to understand it so that they know who's succeeding or not succeeding in their classes. Administrators for planning, program coordinators, etc. So it really makes a difference. Interestingly, I have worked with a student when I was in high school, and we were doing it with teachers, but the students sort of took over this program, and they have stolen the whole project. It was through the National Alliance for Partnerships in Equity, which I'll show you more about. And they now use the data just as much as the teachers do in terms of teaching other students and then also informing faculty on what's working and what's not working. They've formed a coalition, an equity coalition on their campus, and it's student-run entirely. It's amazing. So even the students can use it. Okay, so California Department of Education, here's a link. Community College, here's a link. And if you're part of the community college, they have the new launch board, which is unbelievably fabulous. And if you're not familiar with launch board, or you're not sure how all of this works together regionally, etc. The California Community College Association for Occupational Education is hosting a series of workshop or forums around the state, More and Better CTE. And you can get that information on their website at cccaoe.org. And I'll add the .org, the web address before I send this off to Tonette. I apologize. Okay, so data, how and what. So the most effective way to use data is to really disaggregate it as much as possible, and then to get as much, as many circles in the Venn diagram as possible. So you can really look at, the core indicators, who's participating, who's not participating, because that's what's critical, right? If we have an auto program that has no females, we know there's a problem. But if we're graduating 87% of our students, then we might not actually disaggregate. Or if we're looking and race and ethnicity is disparate based upon the makeup of your own community, then it might be something that you want to look at. Okay, you simply cannot make lasting change until you absolutely identify the problem. If you know it's single Hispanic females who are not succeeding in your programs, then you can target services to those students that are the most effective and that will give you the most bang for your buck. And understanding that precisely is what will allow you to identify the root cause of why those single Hispanic females are not succeeding in whatever the program is. And then I think the biggest thing that I've seen over the last 20 years is there must be a commitment to change, and it really kind of needs to start at the top, or at least include the top, so that when changes need to be made, they can be implemented and supported. So get everybody on board that you can. Okay, so when do you use data? All the time. Every semester, every program planning, before you write every grant, before you fill out your Perkins plan, etc. Okay, so here's sort of course completion by gender. And I just want to look, you can see in the female, it's a little bit, I didn't put the percentages on the map because it's sort of easier here. So if you look, you start with 20% female, and this is actual data from a natural CTE course. So they started with 20% female in their first CTE course, and then dropped down by the time those students were graduating to 12%. That would be somewhere that you would want to start looking. The first two stay the same, still 20%. The number has dropped, but the percentages remain the same because the males have dropped as well. However, if you are looking at the drop between course 2 and 3, that's a pretty big drop. 6% is a big drop, and then again you drop some more. So what is happening here is where I would start looking. And the whole, you can sort of see the pattern holds across the years. And you want to look at data as much as you can across the years. Okay, same thing, kind of different, a little bit different representation. Your first year, you start out with 100, it's just different data, and you end up with 54% females. Or, I'm sorry, 54% completion for all students. And the question that you want to ask yourself here is, do we need to graduate 64 students, 84 students, or 87 students, or 121? What does the industry actually require? Because if we're producing more students than there are jobs, we're creating a disservice for everyone. And if we're not creating enough, we're doing the same. So you need to work with your industry partners to identify, how many do we really need? How many can go on? How many can they be absorbed into, if you're at the K-12, K-adult level, how many are being absorbed into the community college and then getting jobs? So on and so forth. Any questions about that? Okay. Okay, so I told you a little bit about NAEP, but here it is. They created probably, I want to say a decade ago, but it still holds in most ways, the non-traditional preparation of root causes and strategies document. And what they did is they went out and they researched all the research that had been done across the country on why students were not successful in programs, what was the root cause, and then what were some strategies to close the gaps that those root causes were creating. So all of these, it's available on the napeequity.org website. It's also available on JSPAC's website. Since they have produced this document, and I think my guess is that they'll redo it soon, but micromessages has come up as a huge issue, as has mindset. And those two are not included in the original document, so they have asterisks there, but we're going to talk about some of these. Okay, so this again is from NAPE. NAPE is, the website is napeequity.org, and they are fabulous. They do lots of research. They do enormous amounts of professional development. They have an amazing conference each year in Washington, D.C., where you get to go to the lobby day and so on and so forth. So we have, so this is their culture wheel on the way that bias and behavior and stereotypes and all of these things fit together and how they impact students. So the first is, we have cultural stereotypes, which we all have. We're all raised in a particular part of the country with a particular set of parents and a particular environment, and that influences the way that we think, feel, and operate. And it creates bias either for or against certain populations or certain groups of students, which then create micromessages, both positive and negative, which then, layered upon one upon the other, create an accumulation of disadvantage or advantagement for the student. And it changes the way that they feel about themselves, either in a positive way or a negative way. And if it's in a negative way, they may drop out of the program. If it's in a positive way, they're more inclined to complete the program. So this is kind of where we can all start looking and really thinking, like, what is it that I can do directly to stop, to become aware of my bias, to change my micromessages from positive to negative. And I have seen this in classrooms literally across the state, well, actually across the country, where teachers will often go, oh my gosh, I was doing a keynote address in San Francisco, and we were talking about micromessages, and I said, does anyone think of a micromessage that they deliver? And this woman stood up and she said, oh my gosh, I can't believe it, but I roll my eyes at my students when they ask questions that I think are stupid. She goes, I've never thought of it as, it was just this huge aha moment for her. And she had really never been aware of it. It wasn't intentionally unkind or unhelpful thing, but I'm sure it was for her students. And, she was committed at that point to, at least she was aware. Whether she went back and stopped or apologized or what have you is something that I can't confirm. But it certainly changes the way that you look and you think about your behavior in the classroom, which honestly, most of the rest of the workshop is going to be about that. Okay, so micromessages, shoot. Darn it all. Okay, before we go on, bias. Now you all have to take a pen because I missed a slide in here. So there, and I will add it in before I send it to Tony and put it up on the website. There's a organization out of Harvard University called the Implicit Project, and this is just a series of very short tests, I guess, that identify bias that you hold. And it's not 100%, and it's not, but it is scientifically sound, and it has been done hundreds and thousands of times. It started as one person's PhD research, part of their doctoral program, and it has just taken off from there. And it's everything from cultural bias to religious bias to political bias to Native American bias to You name it, they've got it. Military, everything. It's extraordinary. So I would recommend highly that you go to, just Google implicit bias. It'll pop right up, and take some tests. Identify where your bias is. Do you have a bias either for or against women working outside the home, or women in science, or men being the primary caregiver? And if so, how does that influence your classroom behavior? How does it influence your counseling behavior? And what does it do to the messages that you send to your students, positive or negative? So implicit project, and I highly recommend it. And students love this. So do parents, and so I've never done it with anybody where they weren't fascinated. They didn't always share their information, and the first time I did it, I was stunned at my results, truly stunned. So it can be shocking. Okay, so then micro messages. So micro messages, we get 10 to 40 of them in a 10-minute period. The impact is significantly greater than the intent. It doesn't matter what the woman who rolls her eyes at the students meant, what it said to the student about, God, I'll never ask her a question again, was the intent, the impact, and changed this behavior within their classroom. There are micro inequities like rolling your eyes, or micro affirmations like touching the hand of a student and saying, yeah, absolutely, give me more, tell me more, dig farther, I know you've got it in you. Those are completely different messages. They're tiny, they're unnoticeable in a day. You couldn't identify 10 or 40 in a 10-minute period if you really sat down. But one is dropped in the morning, then the next one, and then the next one. If they're all micro inequities, by lunchtime that student just might be folding. A student comes into your classroom and they are from a high poverty area, and their clothes might not be perfect, etc., and they're met with students in micro inequities, and the bus drivers micro inequities, and the counselors, and so on and so forth. That's pretty hard for a student to take. So it changes it. And it changes the student's belief on what they can and can't complete, which is the self-efficacy. And this is really a critical piece, because it then changes whether or not they see themselves as a successful engineer, or a successful auto tech, or as a successful veterinary technician. It's really critically important that we make sure that once you become aware of your micro inequities, you can sort of start transitioning them over into micro affirmations. And what's critical is that if you deliver a micro inequity in a classroom in a public manner, and then an hour later, a day later, a week later, you go, oh my gosh, what was that about? That was horrible. Publicly apologize, publicly make amends to that student in the public in the same way that you delivered the initial micro inequity. It teaches students so much, regardless of their age. It teaches them to publicly apologize. It teaches students that you have just this huge learning curve as well, and makes you so much more human, because we all have failings. But students don't really know you have feelings. They think you're pretty darn cool, most of them, even though they try hard to convince us otherwise. Okay, so any questions about micro messages? Y'all are eating your lunch and being quiet. Okay. Okay, so this is one of my very favorite books, and it's one of my very favorite ideas. The whole idea behind it, of stereotype threat, is that a student can walk into a classroom to take a test of any sort that is important to them, and they are all of a sudden struck with the idea that they are going to confirm as a negative stereotype as self-characteristic. So the stereotype about women and math is that we can't do it. So I walk in to take a test. The first question they ask me is, what's my name, what's my gender, what's my classroom, whatever it is. Or I just am seated next to Javier, and Javier's a male, and so my little animalian brain starts thinking, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And my scores, research has shown, and this has been done literally thousands of times, in all sorts of ways, from math to golf to, in the art, they've used it in the Army, everywhere. It's just incredible. Our scores can drop by up to 30%, 29%, I think. And it's because our brain is being taken up by white noise or something that takes away our ability to concentrate. So it's only relevant when the stakes are high for the student. The student, it could be the SAT or the GRE, and if the student doesn't care, it's not going to have any impact. But it could also be just the basic math, and the student cares, and that's it. Then, sitting next to Javier is going to have a bigger problem. But once they understand it, it goes away so fast. It's profoundly impactful for a teacher to stand up at the front of the classroom or the proctor and say, so we know that tests frequently, or math tests frequently, indicate that men are better at math than women. However, that's not true. It's generally the way that the test was designed, and we have designed the test to eliminate that inadequacy or that disparity. And the test score is normalized, almost entirely. And the interesting thing is that the Javiers of the world, the males in the math test, were getting a little bump, while the females were getting a drop in their grades. And so the males' grades may drop a little bit while the females go up a lot. And again, this has been done by many, many people in many, many situations in terms of research. It's also, there's the original book is just called Whistling Vivaldi, and I highly recommend it. It's beautifully written. It's so interesting. Claude Steele is now the provost of Stanford University, and it's just really a lovely book. But this one is how the stereotypes affect us and what we can do about it. So it's very oriented towards fixing the situation. You don't have to believe, the student doesn't have to believe in the stereotype in order to have an impact by it. They just have to know that it's there. If you learn about it and you myth bust it, I guess, then students will learn better. And then these ones at the bottom are just sort of ways to reduce the impact. And they all come from the reducingstereotypethreat.org website, where I think there's about 11 or 12 different things that you can do. They're all free. It's, reframing the task, teach incremental learning, so on and so forth. So really easy to fix, really high impact, really, really high impact. So if you're looking at students who have barriers in auto shop or whatever it is, and again, if I were a classroom teacher, I would be teaching my students about stereotype threat. I would have posters on the wall that discuss stereotype threat and micromessages. I would give the students nothing to look at and read about except what I really want them to, Let's have a micromessages poster. Let's have an stereotype threat poster. Easy to make, cheap to print. Okay. Mindset, another Stanford bigwig, Carol Dweck, and then there's also Mary Kay Reed. Honestly, I haven't read this book, but it's based on the research of Carol Dweck. And mindset is the idea that most of us, but students come into their classroom with sort of with one of two mindsets. A fixed mindset, which says that my brain is this big and it doesn't get any bigger, and anything that disproves that I won't deal with. So they avoid challenges in order to make sure that they don't disprove their intelligence. They put in less effort because if you have to put in effort, then you are not as smart as you thought you were. They are not persistent. And you know what? It's really funny because I raised that kid. My son is crazy smart. Tests in the top 3% of the nation in all of the standardized testing, and failed every class since 4th grade. And it was all about mindset. And I got this book when he was about, I don't know, probably 10. And I gave it to him and I said, you know, read this. And it was really powerful for him. I read it on the plane home, just devoured it. And now when he starts giving up or avoiding a challenge or something, I just remind him I just say mindset to him, and he gets really mad at me, and then generally changes his behavior a little bit. So very interesting, very, very creative. And again, Carol Dweck has a fabulous website. You can just Google her name, Mindset, or Mindset, it'll come up. And find a whole host of different resources, training materials, so on and so forth. But one of the most important things to convey to your students is not that they're smart, but that they put in a lot of effort. So instead of saying, wow, you did really well on that test, say something like, wow, you really put a lot of effort in studying, or, you know, into building that model, or whatever it is. And then really getting students, again, this goes back to an earlier slide of incremental learning. The power of yet is so important. When a student says, oh, I just can't do math, or oh, I can't write a paragraph, just finish off their sentence with yet. And it changes the way we think about, it changes the way students think about themselves. They're not done. You know, I mean, research is showing that the cerebral cortex is not fully formed until students are in their mid to early 20s. So, you know, we remind them of that. When I work with students, I frequently, younger students in particular, I go, well, you couldn't really hold your head up very long ago. You know, you couldn't ride a bike, you couldn't dribble a basketball. You're really good at all that stuff now. And it begins to have them start thinking, you know, oh, this is cumulative. I learned one thing, I learned another thing, and another thing. And whether that goes with, you know, engineering programs or auto tech programs or, you know, what have you, doesn't make any difference. It's all the power of yet. Okay, I would highly recommend, again, these books. Again, Mindset is beautifully written, very easy to read, and so crazy interesting. Oh my goodness. Okay, so attribution theory is influenced by all of it. We don't know for sure, but social sciences fairly confident that ethnicity and gender influence attribution style, that it's sort of a learned behavior as well as something sort of ingrained. And then of course you can't really parse out what's learned about being a woman versus what's influence, we're born with. You know, if you haven't read Pink Brain, Blue Brain, that's an amazingly great book too. If you're interested in that topic, like what is really innate and what is learned. Not much is innate, by the way, just the answer to that whole book. You don't have to read it now. But is the locus of control internal or external? Can I change the situation? And is it stable or unstable? So am I in control, and also is it controllable? So if I say, well, I'm a girl and I just can't do sports, or I can't throw a ball, is that in my control or outside of my control? And students develop their attribution theory in a lot of different ways, but by and large, women end up attributing their successes externally and their failures internally. And men, by and large, do the same. So George and I walk into a test. We both fail the test. I walk out saying, see, I can't do it. And George walks out saying, wow, that was a really hard test. The teacher was really bad. I was really hungover. Whatever. Not his not his internal attribute, though. Conversely, we both walk into the test, another test, a week later, and we both ace the test. I'm going to walk out of the room saying, well, the teacher really explained this so much more clearly. Or I studied really hard, which is, again, it's about work that I did, but not myself. And George is going to walk out saying, yeah, I really am just that good. And that's a stable condition. And that's a really important difference. And I think that we can change these attribution theories by giving feedback, by not giving the same feedback over and over to each student, teaching our parents about it, teaching our students about it, and then also giving our students information about things like mindset and stereotype threat and micromessages, all of it, because that also really influences the way that we internal our successes and failures. Okay, so self-efficacy, which is developed a concept by Albert Bandura, and really fascinating, interesting work done years ago, but really has not been debunked much. It has been strengthened a lot. And it really guides the student's belief in whether or not they can be successful at a task. It doesn't have to do with self-esteem. It has to do with being able to accomplish a task, whether that task be gigantic, like becoming a rocket scientist, or small, like, finishing that running race. It doesn't really make any difference. It's whether or not they can see themselves, whether they have the belief in their ability to complete a task and reach a goal. So listed here, are the ways that strong self-efficacy and weak self-efficacy sort of illustrate themselves. And there's a lot of commonalities between all of the other topics that we've been talking about. The challenges for somebody with strong self-efficacy, challenges are there. They're fun. Same thing with mindset. Kids that have a growth mindset, they see themselves as being able to conquer anything. They love challenges. They're going to go after it. Students who have a strong self-efficacy, they're going to recover quicker. Same thing with mindset. If a child with a growth mindset is going to go, oh, well, I didn't do very well last time. I'll just need to actually practice more, try harder, study longer, change my study habits, whatever it is. They develop deep interest and strong commitments. All of these are really, really similar and really parallel. So the two go together very well, I think. And so mindset will really help in both of these ways. And again, as an educator, this is what I'd have on the walls of the school, not pictures, because it turns out that all of our students don't listen to us all of the time. Who knew, right? Okay, here's some information, a link to more information about Albert Bandura and his research. Okay, 29 out of 39. Okay, we have 15 minutes. Okay. Equity and access, equity and success, equity in and of itself is, it goes way beyond what your school looks like and who's on the campus and so on and so forth. But it's really important because all of the school college publications, all that kind of things, the role models of the staff, this is all about the micromessages. Right? So if all the illustrations, I was on a campus not very long ago, sadly, and they had one of those hall display cases, and I was in the nursing, fire, and EMT wing, I think. There literally was not a picture of anyone but a white female nurse, a white female firefighter, and the EMTs were more mixed, but mostly male. And I thought, well, you just confirmed literally every stereotype and story that has been told to these students over and over and over in movies and television and books and even music. that girls don't and boys can't, or girls can't and boys don't, so on and so forth. So it's really important that we take it seriously, and that we do not reinforce stereotypes, but we also, not only that, but really open up the eyes of our students with images and websites and podcasts, whatever it is, whatever you're doing to recruit and obtain your students, that they really look like them, talk like them, and they are the students that we want to have in our classrooms and that we want to keep there. But if we continue doing this, I was just looking at photographs from, I won't even say where, actually I'll probably get myself in too much trouble. Brand new photographs. They were just emailed to me 2 weeks ago, and they are so gender stereotyped and ethnically stereotyped. I was shocked. I didn't even know what to say. They emailed me back and they said, "Did you get them?" I was like, "Yeah, I just didn't know what to say." So, and then make sure that your staff is just as equitable and diverse as you can possibly get them. Make sure that mentoring opportunities from your staff down to your students is equitable. Who's getting them? Are they paid? I mean, not paid, but are they e-mentoring or in-person mentoring? And does that make a difference? Professional development, same thing. Who's going? How long is it? Etc. So really important. And then critical, I think, is that we make sure that counseling and counselors are informed about both CTE and equity and access in a way that it goes beyond all kids are going to a four-year college, all of the kids at the community college are transferring to a four-year university. There's got to be some understanding. And I don't think that counselors are have poor intentions, but I do think that there's, first of all, the ratio between counselors and students is generally incredibly high, which makes it very difficult. But also they're woefully uninformed or about what CTE is, how much it pays, and what the benefits are for a variety of different students. There is a fabulous book by Kevin Fleming, Dr. Kevin Fleming, and we did a webinar, which we have the webinar but not the recording, unfortunately, right now, called Redefining, oh Lordy, Tonette, are you on there? Redefining, I'll figure it out. Redefining the Challenger or something like that. And it talks about the ratio between the professional, the paraprofessional, and the technicians. The CTE students are 70% of those of that ratio is CTE students. And so we really need to talk about that and talk about that, an enormous number of our CTE students are earning as much or more than students with a BA. And what does that mean? And how do we change that? How do we change the idea that CTE is, as they say, it's not your grandfather's career tech ed. Okay. So classroom climate, make sure that the materials are varied, so on and so forth. I'm not going to go through much of this because it's all sort of a little bit repetitive. School and community, it has to be top bottom. I honestly cannot tell you how many times I go onto a campus, whether it's K-12 or adult ed or community college, and the signage is so inadequate in the career tech ed program, but I can always pretty much go to the back of the buildings and find it. Find CTE areas. And, it is what it is. We probably are not going to get them to change the buildings, but at least let's make the signage, exciting and clear and maybe multilingual if that's your environment. Whatever it is that needs to be done so that students who are just coming onto our campus are successful at least in finding their classrooms. Because that's a pretty big micro message. If they can't find their classrooms, they're going to say to themselves, yeah, I can't find the classroom. I sure as heck I'm not able to finish the course. And equity and access needs to be part of the front. It needs to be the framework that's looked through, not as an afterthought. So everything sort of needs to come from there, whether you're designing signage or textbooks or recruiting materials or your website. And the websites are improving vastly. That's pretty cool. Okay. Again, more counseling. I'm a huge fan of getting counselors on board. And salaries. The good and the bad needs to be discussed with students as they're making their career decisions. I cannot tell you how many times I have worked with students who are so woefully uninformed about what they're going to earn once they finish their degree. And they're like, is this going to be enough? And I'm like, no. No, am I going to earn enough in this career? No. And they're halfway through, or 3/4 of the way through. So we really need to be preparing students for a job that supports themselves and their families. Otherwise, we're sort of cutting off their nose, despite, I don't even know what, can't even finish that one. Okay, so, and then media, of course, is something that we can't have a direct impact on per se. But we can make it work for us or against us. In every television show, in every movie, in every music video, magazines, everything, race, gender, ability, parenthood, everything is depicted, and it's either positive or it's negative. And it's changing again. This has changed dramatically in the last, I would say, 6 or 7 years, but there are still some absolutely egregious examples of television commercials or TV shows that I just am dumbfounded that anyone would put it on the air in this in 2017. But one of the ways that a high school teacher in Colusa came up with was she created the 10-minute Monday media discussion. And so every morning in each of her classes, she started with a 10-minute discussion about where the students would identify the most widely seen or interesting or what have you piece of media that most of them had seen. So a commercial or a TV show or a movie or whatever. And they would discuss it and they would pull it apart for stereotypes, for bias. They would talk about what would happen if they flipped the roles from, instead of that being a white female, what if it was a Hispanic male, so on and so forth. There was a financial commercial, and I don't know if it's still on, but two people get into a taxi, one from each side, and one is a tall white male in a suit, and the other one is an African-American woman, well-dressed, so on and so forth. And he turns out to be a financial planner or something like that, and she starts asking him questions. And that was one of the things that they came up with was, what if they just flipped that script? So she was a financial planner, and he was asking her questions. Same content, same company, same everything, same script, completely different message. So you can do things like that really in 5 minutes and in any class. And if your students, whether they're 34 or 14, are going to talk about the media anyway, then make it work for you. And really teach them critical analysis. And that will help in pretty much everything that they're doing with your classes. Okay. This is a study that was done a couple of years ago, in 14, I think. And it really supports the idea that parents and families are really critical. So particularly with high schools and younger students in adult education and community colleges, make sure that we are talking to the parents. Make sure that we are informing them. My son graduated from high school, and if I had not been his mother, he would not have ever heard of the words community college. And neither would any of his peers. And that I thought was really disheartening in this day and age, both financially, it's so expensive to go to four-year university, but also because it offers so many opportunities that the 4 years do not offer. The bullet that I made in red I thought was really alarming, that 76% of the parents didn't know where to get the information about anything but a four-year college. That's crazy to me, absolutely crazy. So I think that's something, if you're at the high school level or middle school, that would be really beneficial to add to your college and career information days. Okay, role models, mentors, and coaches, the sort of definitions between them. I don't think that there's any evidence, any research, any social theories that do not support the idea that all of these three people in a student's life are critical, and that it only takes one person in a struggling student's life to say, yeah, you can do this, and for that student to really believe it and to really take it to heart and actually go forward and do it. We've all heard that story. We might have been that one person, or we might have been that person who was exposed. We might have been that student who was exposed to that one person, who had them believe in them, and it changed the course of our life. It changed our trajectory. It changed where we decide to go to school, whatever. So make sure that the mentors, coaches, and role models look like the students, sound like the students, are as young as possible. Frequently, there's quite a bit of evidence that shows that if high school students go down into the middle schools, it's really effective. Community college and college students going into the high schools, and then professionals coming into the colleges, versus a professional going into a middle school where they're just sort of not going to relate to that person as much. But a pre-engineering high school student talking to students that are in math and so on and science about engineering is a much different situation. Okay, so next steps. Your next step will be construct a change agent team. Don't try it by yourself. You can change your classroom, but you can't really change much more beyond that by yourself. Sometimes analyze your data, develop a plan of action, implement it, then go back again, analyze your data, see what happened. Did things change? We have a Better Together process on with JSPAC. It's a full 1-year process that takes you through these steps. I don't know if we'll be including them in the work plan for next year, but certainly NAEP has. They're the ones that developed the process. So they are really fabulous at this, and I've done it with them in 4 or 5 different states. They have actually changed the state of Utah, and I say that with complete and utter confidence. I just spent a week in DC with folks from Utah, and we did their initial training of this process maybe 3 years ago, and now every single student in the entire state of Utah will be getting information about, access and equity and Career Tech Ed and STEM courses and, so on and so forth, high wage, high demand careers. Really, it's just extraordinary. They've changed it from the legislation on down to each campus. Really beautiful. California would be harder to do. I'm just saying Utah's a little smaller. Okay. JSPAC is always looking for folks. We need to continue to improve our services. So if you have things that you'd like us to do, please let us know. Either contact Tony or myself. Visit the JSPAC website for resources. Join the listserv so you get the newsletter. Apply to be a member of JSPAC, like I said, on that website. And then continue going to the workshops and the webinars, etc. And then here's the dates for our next conference. I am so excited about this conference. I think this What's Your Frame? It's an exercise that was developed by Susie Hushleaf up in Humboldt, if any of you know her. A little genius. And she developed this process, and I did it with her the first time. It's only been done once, but frankly, we're going from 30 to 300, but we'll see. And it was absolutely eye-opening and extraordinary. So I highly recommend it. Okay, so that is November 30th, December 1st, and pre-conferences will be on the 29th. If you have things that you really want to look at in longer-term workshops, 4-hour workshops, let us know. Data, I don't know, anything you want. Data, a particular special population, maybe the new Perkins will be far enough along that we can actually talk about that and plan for it. I don't know. Okay, we are going to send out a SurveyMonkey survey. But the link is right here. It's super easy, surveymonkey.com/r/jspec_SP101. And let us know. We will be super excited to find out what it is that you'd like and where you want to go in terms of what you need on your campuses and in your communities. And finally, thank you for everything that you guys do. The students are better off for you. So thank you very much. Any questions, comments, concerns, things you need? Thank you, Anne.
I'll just comment to say thank you. I know it's hard to do a presentation without getting much feedback, so thank you for your suggestions and your information.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I hope you put some of them to use.
Definitely.
Have a good day.
Thanks, you too.
Bye, everybody. Have a great week.